No missiles were fired, no ships were sunk, and yet one side walked away with a complete victory. Hidden beneath the freezing waters of the Atlantic, an invisible battle unfolded that almost nobody...
At 4:18 a.m., the Atlantic Ocean looked almost peaceful. The sky was still dark, and only a faint orange glow appeared along the horizon. A U.S. Navy destroyer sliced through the cold water during what everyone believed would be another uneventful patrol. Sailors quietly performed their routine checks while radar operators monitored empty screens that had shown nothing unusual for hours. Coffee cups sat beside glowing computer displays, and conversations on the bridge were relaxed. After weeks at sea, this felt like just another ordinary shift. But deep beneath the waves, hidden by hundreds of meters of freezing water, something had already begun moving. It wasn't a whale, nor was it a civilian research vessel. 3 silent submarines were approaching in perfect formation, carefully avoiding every commercial shipping lane. They had crossed into one of the world's most heavily monitored oceans, believing no one had noticed. They were wrong. Inside the ship's Combat Information Center, the atmosphere changed in an instant. One sonar operator frowned as a faint acoustic signal appeared on his display. At first, it looked like random underwater noise. Seconds later, another signal appeared beside it. Then a third. The computer automatically compared the sounds with thousands of known acoustic signatures stored in its database. The results surprised everyone in the room. These contacts weren't natural. They were mechanical, synchronized, and moving with military precision. The officer supervising the sonar team immediately leaned over the console. Every passing second made the picture clearer. 3 underwater objects were maintaining equal distance from one another while steadily closing toward the American task group. They weren't wandering aimlessly through international waters. Someone had planned this movement with incredible discipline. The quiet routine aboard the destroyer had just ended. The report reached the captain less than 30 seconds later. He studied the tactical display without saying a word. Around him, junior officers waited for the order they expected to hear: General Quarters. Instead, he surprised everyone. "Do not change course," he said calmly. "Continue tracking. I don't want them to know we've detected them." The bridge fell silent. Revealing their awareness too soon could force the submarines to disappear into the deep ocean before American forces understood what they were trying to accomplish. It was a calculated risk. Every minute the submarines remained unaware increased the Navy's chance of learning something valuable. The captain wasn't thinking about winning a battle. He was thinking about gathering intelligence. Somewhere beneath the surface, another commander believed he was hunting an American warship. In reality, the hunter had already become the hunted. Almost 70 miles away, a P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft was completing a routine surveillance mission over the North Atlantic. Suddenly, a secure data link transmitted fresh coordinates from the destroyer. Within seconds, the aircraft commander acknowledged the message and turned toward the new contact area. 4 powerful engines pushed the aircraft forward as mission specialists activated advanced tracking systems. Unlike older patrol aircraft, the Poseidon wasn't simply looking for submarines. It could analyze underwater activity across enormous sections of the ocean using a combination of radar, electronic sensors, sonobuoys, and satellite communications. At nearly the same moment, another message reached nearby American and Allied naval units. Without broadcasting a single public signal, multiple ships quietly adjusted their courses. Far below the surface, the lead submarine suddenly altered its course by only a few degrees. It was a tiny movement, almost impossible to notice without sophisticated tracking software. But experienced American analysts immediately recognized what it meant. This wasn't random navigation. The submarine commander was testing whether anyone was following him. Moments later, one submarine climbed slightly toward shallower water while the other 2 descended deeper into colder layers where sonar detection became more difficult. It was a classic tactic taught to submarine commanders around the world. Separate the formation. Force the enemy to choose. If they tracked the louder submarine, the quieter pair might escape unnoticed. But technology had changed dramatically over the past decade. 40 minutes after the first sonar contact, the distant roar of jet engines echoed across the empty Atlantic sky. The P-8 Poseidon had arrived. Flying at nearly 25,000 feet, the aircraft circled the suspected area while its mission crew compared live sensor data with information streaming from the destroyer below. Inside the cabin, every workstation was alive with activity. Operators tracked underwater movements, electronic emissions, and changing ocean conditions simultaneously. After several careful passes, the aircraft commander gave a single order. The bomb bay doors slowly opened, not to release weapons, but to deploy a network of advanced sonables. One after another, the small floating sensors splashed into the freezing water, spreading across miles of open sea. Within minutes, dozens of underwater microphones began listening to every vibration beneath the surface. As the sonables activated, the tactical picture changed dramatically. Instead of receiving information from a single destroyer's sonar, American analysts were suddenly listening from dozens of different positions at once. Every propeller turn, every engine vibration, and every change in speed created a unique acoustic fingerprint. Powerful computers merged the incoming signals into one massive three-dimensional display, allowing commanders to watch the submarines almost as if the ocean itself had become transparent. The lead submarine continued acting as the decoy, deliberately increasing engine noise to draw attention away from its companions. On older tracking systems, the tactic might have worked perfectly. But modern acoustic software ignored the louder target almost immediately. It focused instead on the faint mechanical rhythms of the two quieter submarines attempting to disappear beneath colder layers of water. Their plan was clever, but it had been designed for an era when computers couldn't think faster than humans. Hundreds of meters below the surface, the atmosphere inside the lead submarine shifted from confidence to concern. The sonar operators listened carefully through their headsets, expecting silence. Instead, unfamiliar signals began appearing from multiple directions. First came a distant sonar pulse. Then another from a completely different angle. Within minutes, the display filled with contacts that hadn't existed before. The commander stared at the tactical screen, realizing something wasn't right. One American destroyer couldn't create this many tracking sources. More forces were arriving. The crew reduced unnecessary movement throughout the submarine, hoping to eliminate every possible sound. Conversation stopped. Equipment checks were performed in complete silence. Even simple footsteps inside the pressure hull became deliberate and controlled. The submarine had entered a dangerous phase of the mission where one careless mistake could reveal its exact location. Rather than rushing into an aggressive response, the American commander made another unexpected decision. No weapons would be launched. No threatening radio messages would be transmitted. Instead, every available sensor remained locked onto the submarines while additional naval units quietly moved into position. Hundreds of miles away, another destroyer altered course. A guided missile cruiser increased speed. An attack submarine already operating in the region received new instructions through a secure underwater communication system. The objective wasn't to force a confrontation, it was to observe everything. Every course correction made by the submarines revealed how they reacted under pressure. Every change in speed exposed new details about their propulsion systems. Military intelligence officers understood that today's information could become tomorrow's advantage. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't destroying an opponent. It's learning exactly how they think before a conflict ever begins. And that's precisely what the U.S. Navy intended to do. Unknown to the submarine commanders, another American vessel had been watching the operation long before the destroyer detected the first contact. Hidden deep beneath the Atlantic, a U.S. attack submarine moved so quietly that it blended almost perfectly with the natural sounds of the ocean. For nearly 2 days, its crew had patiently monitored underwater traffic while remaining completely undetected. Now, after receiving updated tracking data, the submarine slowly adjusted its course without increasing speed or making unnecessary noise. Inside its control room, sailors watched glowing displays that showed every maneuver made by the 3 approaching submarines. They didn't celebrate their advantage. Years of training had taught them that confidence often leads to mistakes. Instead, they followed at a safe distance, recording every acoustic signature and every tactical decision. The three mysterious submarines believed they were operating in complete secrecy. They had no idea an invisible observer had been quietly following their every move since before the operation had even begun. 2 hours after the first contact, what had started as a routine patrol had evolved into one of the most carefully coordinated tracking operations of the year. Additional American warships silently moved into assigned positions, creating overlapping surveillance zones across hundreds of square miles. Every captain knew exactly where to be without exchanging unnecessary radio traffic. High above, the P-8 Poseidon continued dropping news sonabuoys whenever gaps appeared in the acoustic picture. The ocean was no longer an open escape route, it had become a carefully constructed trap. Inside the tactical command center aboard the destroyer, dozens of moving symbols covered the digital map. Every few seconds, fresh information arrived from satellites, aircraft, underwater sensors, and allied naval units. The operation looked less like a simple submarine hunt and more like a giant chess match where every piece moved according to a carefully planned strategy. The submarines still believed they had options, but with every passing minute, those options quietly disappeared. Deep below the waves, the submarine commander understood that continuing the mission was becoming increasingly dangerous. Remaining on the same course would only allow American forces to tighten their surveillance even further. He decided it was time to take a calculated risk. The three submarines separated completely, each choosing a different heading and depth. One accelerated toward deeper water, another reduced speed almost to a crawl, while the third disappeared into a region filled with underwater ridges and steep rocky terrain. It was a classic escape strategy designed to overwhelm pursuers by forcing them to divide their attention. For a brief moment, the tactical display aboard the American destroyer became more complicated as the contacts spread apart. Junior officers watched carefully, wondering which submarine commanders would prove more patient. But the American commander didn't appear concerned. Instead of reacting emotionally, he calmly issued new tracking assignments. Every submarine would have its own shadow, and none of them would be allowed to vanish. As daylight slowly spread across the Atlantic, another powerful asset entered the operation. 2 naval helicopters lifted off from a nearby warship, flying just above the waves toward the suspected submarine positions. Unlike fast-moving patrol aircraft, these helicopters could stop almost anywhere over the ocean. Arriving above their assigned search areas, each crew lowered a sophisticated dipping sonar into the water using a long reinforced cable. Seconds later, the underwater sensors began transmitting live acoustic data back to the aircraft. Every few minutes, the helicopters lifted the sonar, moved several miles, and lowered it again, creating a constantly shifting detection pattern that made hiding increasingly difficult. Below them, submarine commanders could hear faint sonar pulses echoing through the water from above while destroyers tracked them from the surface and another submarine quietly followed from below. Escape was becoming more complicated with every hour. The ocean suddenly felt much smaller than it had the night before. Nearly 12 hours had passed since the operation began, and fatigue was beginning to affect everyone involved. On the American ships, fresh watch teams replaced tired sailors, allowing operations to continue without interruption. Inside the submarines, however, there was no such luxury. Crew members remained at their stations, constantly listening for new sonar signals while monitoring engine performance and navigation systems. Every unexpected sound caused heads to turn. Every report from the sonar room increased the tension inside the control center. The commanders knew they couldn't remain under continuous observation forever. Eventually, they would have to attempt a breakout. Meanwhile, the American attack submarine continued following from a safe distance, matching every turn with remarkable precision. It never rushed. It never closed unnecessarily. Like an experienced hunter tracking prey through a dense forest, it allowed patience, not speed, to do the work. Sometimes remaining invisible was far more powerful than revealing your presence. As darkness returned for the second time, one submarine commander made a bold decision. Rather than continuing to evade detection, he ordered a sudden burst of speed. Powerful engines roared to life as the submarine surged forward through the cold Atlantic waters, hoping sheer velocity would break the tracking network before American forces could react. For several tense minutes, the tactic appeared to work. Acoustic signals became distorted as turbulent water surrounded the submarine, briefly complicating the tracking picture. But the success didn't last. High above, the P-8 Poseidon immediately adjusted its search pattern while nearby helicopters shifted their positions to cover the predicted escape route. The destroyers altered course, and the American attack submarine quietly increased speed just enough to maintain contact without revealing itself. Within minutes, the fleeing submarine found itself surrounded once again by an invisible web of sensors stretching across sea, sky, and beneath the waves. The desperate gamble had failed, and the operation was only becoming more intense. After nearly 18 exhausting hours beneath the Atlantic, the submarine commander's new conventional escape tactics were no longer working. Every change in depth, every alteration in speed, and every attempt to hide inside colder layers of water had been anticipated. With few options remaining, the lead commander ordered the deployment of acoustic decoys. One after another, small cylindrical devices drifted into the sea, broadcasting fake engine noises and artificial propeller signatures in every direction. Within seconds, the American tactical displays filled with new contacts. For a brief moment, it looked as though the submarines had split into a much larger force. But the confusion lasted only seconds. Advanced acoustic software immediately began comparing every sound against the signatures collected since the operation had started. One by one, the false contacts disappeared from the display until only the 3 genuine submarines remained. The escape plan had failed almost as quickly as it had begun, and the commanders below realized their technological advantage had vanished years ago. Throughout the entire operation, the American attack submarine had remained completely silent, observing from a distance without making its presence known. But now its captain decided it was time to send a message. Not one of aggression, but of certainty. Without changing course, the submarine briefly activated a low-powered active sonar pulse. The sound echoed through the surrounding water for only a fraction of a second before disappearing into the Atlantic. It wasn't powerful enough to expose the submarine's exact location, nor was it intended to threaten the opposing crews. It served a different purpose entirely. Inside the nearest submarine, sonar operators froze. The pulse had come from somewhere close, far closer than anyone had imagined possible. The control room fell silent as officers exchanged uneasy glances. They finally understood what had happened. Someone had been following them for hours without ever being detected. The realization hit harder than any weapon could have. As dawn approached for the second time, reality became impossible to ignore. Fuel reserves were no longer the greatest concern. Crew fatigue had reached dangerous levels after hours of constant maneuvering and uninterrupted tension. Every sonar alert forced immediate action. Every report from the control room demanded another decision. The intelligence mission that had begun with confidence was rapidly collapsing under relentless surveillance. The submarine commanders gathered for a secure underwater communication exchange and reached the conclusion none of them wanted to admit. Continuing forward would achieve nothing except increasing the risk of a serious international incident. Within minutes, new navigation orders were entered into their guidance systems. One after another, the submarines reduced speed, changed heading, and began withdrawing toward open waters. No emergency announcement was made. No dramatic declaration followed. The mission simply ended in silence, exactly as it had begun, but the outcome was very different from what had been planned. The American task group made no attempt to celebrate. There were no victory announcements, no dramatic press conferences, and no triumphant headlines waiting back home. Instead, the ships continued monitoring the retreating submarines from a respectful distance, ensuring they left the area without further incident. For the intelligence officers, however, the operation had been an extraordinary success. Over nearly 20 hours, they had collected thousands of acoustic recordings, propulsion characteristics, maneuvering habits, and communication patterns. Every engine adjustment, every emergency turn, and every tactical decision became valuable information stored inside secure military databases. Future crews would study these recordings to recognize similar submarines within minutes, perhaps even seconds. The greatest victories at sea are rarely measured by explosions or damaged ships. More often, they are measured by knowledge, because understanding an opponent today can prevent a conflict tomorrow. In the world beneath the waves, information is every bit as powerful as firepower. When the final sonar contact faded beyond the horizon, the Atlantic returned to its familiar silence. Merchant ships continued crossing the ocean, fishing boats resumed their daily routines, and satellites quietly circled overhead as if nothing unusual had happened. To the rest of the world, it had been just another ordinary day at sea. But hidden beneath that calm surface, a remarkable contest of patience, technology, and strategy had unfolded without a single missile being launched. It proved that modern naval warfare is no longer decided only by who possesses the biggest fleet or the most powerful weapons. It belongs to those who can gather information first, remain invisible the longest, and make the smartest decisions under pressure. Somewhere beneath those cold Atlantic waters, 3 submarine crews sailed home carrying an unforgettable lesson. And somewhere else, American analysts quietly archived another operation that would never make newspaper headlines, but would shape the next generation of underwater warfare. Sometimes, the battles history never hears about are the ones that matter the most.